Today I will be reviewing the Huawei P9 Plus. So as always, let's start off with the specs. The P9 Plus has a 5.5-inch display running at a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It has an octa-core processor, 4 of the cores are clocked at 2.5 GHz and the other 4 run at 1.8 GHz. On top of that, it has 4 GB of RAM, dual 12 megapixel cameras and LED flashes, and an 8 megapixel front-facing camera. As for storage, it comes in a 64 GB capacity and it also has a microSD card slot which supports up to a 256 GB card. Speaking of cards, it is only compatible with nano SIM cards. And finally, it is running Android version 6.0 Marshmallow and it is dressed up in Huawei's very own Emotion UI. We'll get to that later. So let's move on to the good aspects of this smartphone. The design. The best way for me to sum it up is that Huawei looked at their flawed design of the Nexus 6P and made it exactly what it should have been from the very beginning. Those pointlessly large chunky bezels? Gone. That protruding camera piece which looked like a phaser from Star Trek? Gone. As a result, the phone is a lot slimmer and you don't even realize it's in your pocket, and on top of that, the design is a lot more sleek, simplified and elegant. I especially love the aesthetics on the back. It just looks so premium due to its glossy coating, which for once is not a fingerprint magnet. So yeah, the design is absolutely fantastic, and in my few weeks of testing it, I've had no complaints. You even get a nicely integrated fingerprint scanner which you can use to unlock the phone and verify payments, and it is incredibly responsive. In fact, it's one of the most responsive fingerprint scanners I have ever used. To give you an idea of how responsive it is, you don't even need to put your whole finger on the sensor. Just placing half your finger on the scanner pretty much works just as well. So the design is excellent. But what about the screen? As I said earlier, it is a 5.5-inch 1080p Super AMOLED display, and I don't say this lightly, but this is one of the best 1080p displays I have ever seen. Usually when I am dealing with a 1080p screen, I can tell, but when I took this phone out of the box and started using it, my eyes were convinced that I was looking at a 2K display. The contrast, colors, and pin-sharp detail truly is very impressive. A large contributing factor as to why the screen is so excellent is because of the Super AMOLED display. It really brings your home screen and videos to life, and as you all know, I love consuming media on my smartphone, and it is always an absolute treat to watch a video on this thing. And what do you need to accompany a great screen? You need great sound. Does the P9 Plus deliver on that front? Well, let's take a look. It has one front-facing speaker and one side-facing speaker. Now immediately I thought the speaker on this was going to be average at best, just like every other smartphone with down-facing speakers, but I'm glad to say that I was wrong. The feature that actually surprised me the most about this phone is the speakers. Now if you cover up the bottom speaker grill, then you'll notice that the one behind the earpiece is really not that loud, so you primarily have to rely on the bottom speaker, and quite frankly, this is one of the best sounding speakers I have heard on a smartphone. It even beats out some smartphones that actually have dual front-facing speakers, such as all the Xperia phones. The sound is very detailed, it goes really loud, and I noticed it even has some bass to it as well. But what really is incredible, and to a certain extent revolutionary, is that you don't even need to direct the sound with your hands to make it sound clearer. It actually sounds at its best when you hold it like you're supposed to. So yeah, the first downward facing speaker that doesn't require you to cup it with your hands in order to get the best out of it. Okay, performance. As I said earlier, it has an octa-core processor, 4 of the cores are clocked at 2.5 GHz and the other 4 run at 1.8 GHz. I'm not going to spend much time talking about this, mostly because I will just sound like a broken record. With all top-end phones, you are obviously going to get top-notch performance. And it goes without saying that it'll be great for gaming, you know it's going to be great for web browsing, etc. In fact, the only thing worth talking about is if the phone did not perform as expected. Then I would have something to talk about, but luckily, the phone is incredibly responsive like practically all the other top-end smartphones out there. However, it's worth pointing out that the skin that Huawei have put on top of Android does not degrade the performance at all, so that's a good thing. And again, we will talk about the skin later. Battery life. The battery life has been really good. In fact, it's actually a lot better than many other smartphones out there. I've been easily getting 2 days of medium to heavy use before the phone needs a charge. When I was using it heavily, I managed to get a day and a half, and if you want to use this as your full-time entertainment device for games and videos, etc., then it will last you about 4 to 5 hours. So let's talk about the 12 megapixel cameras. In short, I thought they were great. The photos are really clear, very detailed, and I love these macro shots right here. The clarity really is stunning. My only complaint is that this camera only records up to 1080p video. Now it isn't bad by any means, but it's pretty much the same as all other capable 1080p video recording smartphones. A 4K option would have been appreciated, especially when you take into account that this phone has a SD card slot that supports up to a 256GB microSD card. You could have fit a good amount of 4K video onto it. Okay, now it's time for the bad aspects. Something I noticed upon opening my first app is that I needed to grant it basic permissions before I could use it. This is not supposed to happen on any Android smartphones unless you install certain third-party applications from the Google Play Store. But confusingly, with the P9 Plus, upon their first launch, every single pre-installed application requires you to grant it basic permissions. And for the life of me, I don't know why this is. It feels like a basic verification error that Huawei unintentionally made and they didn't catch on to it before they started mass-producing the phone. The second thing I didn't like was the emotion UI, but sod that, let's call it what it is. The iOS skin. This is basically Huawei's attempt to make their phone look exactly like iOS, and yes, that does include removing the app drawer. Now to a certain extent, this isn't a huge deal, as you can easily install a different launcher and get the stock Android experience, but what is a huge deal is that some things are changed to look like iOS and you can't change them at all. Things like the notification bar. This in particular has been affected the most, and thanks to this iOS skin, it really does suck. It is completely butchered, and most of its functionality has been removed just so it can be closer in appearance and functionality to the crappy notification bar in iOS. And unfortunately, you cannot change this, unless you decide to root and install a custom ROM, but that's only if you really know what you are doing. Now, when the skin is not copying iOS, it does have some legitimately good features, such as changing the animation of your home screen and adding effects to wallpapers before applying them, amongst other things. Now, these are some welcome additions, and Huawei really should have spent more time incorporating more of these rather than stealing from iOS. This is practically a lawsuit waiting to happen. It is practically gift wrapped for Apple, and why aren't they taking them to court? Even though they take Samsung to court over much smaller similarities? That's rhetorical, I know the reason why. So yeah, those are my only complaints. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this phone. I was expecting it to be the same and just as boring as many other phones out there today, but it actually was a lot more fun to use than those. That being said, I personally think this phone would be next to perfect for me if it had stock Android. But if you want a phone that's kind of a hybrid between Android and iOS, then this phone will be perfect for you. So the Huawei P9 Plus gets an 8 out of 10. If you like what you saw in this video, then I cannot recommend this phone highly enough. So that's it for the review. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you haven't yet, feel free to click that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with my future videos, and I'll catch all of you next time. Take care.